Hello, and thank you for tuning in to today's pitch. I'll cut straight to the chase. Video games have been around for far too long for the surrounding study and critique of them to still be this siloed. Widespread literacy is forever stunted when we can only rely on companies for what they want to redistribute and how they want to sell their products. It's also stunted when we don't make it accessible for newcomers to explore. So, let's come up with a new method of understanding games through evaluation, categorization, and preservation. These systems are broken, and it doesn't just prevent us from finding the types of games we like, it prevents developers from being able to make the types of games we want to see. Together, we can change that. This community has brilliant minds. More historians making primary sources accessible, digital archaeologists modernizing what was once lost to time, and documentarians telling stories that have more impact now than they would have 25 years ago. My name is Dylan Belmont, and now we're connecting those dots with this project, the Belmont Index. I believe all this great work can be amplified if we just have a way to put it all in perspective, adding the context that threads it all together. The index provides a theoretical framework and practical tools still in development to make sure that can happen. First, however, we must understand just how drastic these issues are. Now, I'd recommend watching this video in its entirety, but if you feel well acquainted with the industry's issues already and just want to skip to the solution, feel free to skim the summarized written version of this proposal linked in the description, or use the chapter guides below. Let's begin with evaluation. What makes games worth experiencing? Personally, I'm unconvinced by this assumption that just because reviews are inherently subjective means the only shorthand rating we can rely on is an aggregate of all scores. There's no doubt awarded numbers are always going to reflect a critic's opinion to some degree, but shouldn't it tell us a little bit more about the game? A flat scale, 1 to 10, bad to good, is worthless for a medium as diverse as this. How would you rate Elden Ring on the same scale as Puyo Puyo Tetris 2? The consumer expects vastly different experiences, but there's no way to capture that nuance with a number. We can only compare apples to oranges. This seems to breed implicit rules for the ratings, and rather than what you might expect, like the numbers being related to quality, it often almost seems closer related to budget and scope. The floor for blockbuster AAA releases is usually, what, 75? Even for games entirely forgotten within the year? And that's not a fault of the reviewers, it's a fault of the system. Critics and journalists are kind of trapped either way, and any insight they provide is reduced to a meaningless number. Also contributing to the issue is a long-standing bias in favor of innovation. If a game releases and it's mostly iterative, it surely won't match its predecessor's score, even if it does improve upon it in every conceivable way. To me, this seems like a relic of days long gone where having the most bits or the most realistic graphics was king. Now, don't get me wrong, pushing the industry forward with new, innovative ideas is absolutely critical. But there's more to the world than that, right? Emphasis on innovation dates reviews, because it doesn't matter that this was fresh in 1989, it's awful to play now. Truly awful. Meanwhile, critics didn't think this was fresh in 2014, but man, is it good. So if I want to find the best version of that type of game, reviews are the last place I'd look. What are they good for then? We can do better. Evaluating games with their peers, differentiating between equally valuable trailblazers and oddballs. However, something stands in the way of even knowing what a game's peers really are.
That leads us into our next issue, categorization. We don't really know how to talk about games as part of a broader ecosystem. Certainly not in the same way that we can with books or movies.
More often than not, we tend to group games by console, which puts up some needless barriers. If you ask what the best games on the PlayStation 2 are, ports of incredible arcade games are not even in consideration, even if that's the only place to play them. Your only shot at introduction to them is if you go through the family, the genre from which they come.
What we typically associate with genres, like sci-fi or fantasy, is impractical for us when the primary subject matter, gameplay, varies so much. It might seem arbitrary, but it does really impact the quality of our discussions.
Remember how good it felt once the dam broke in the late 2010s and we finally started getting 3D platformers again? When more than just Mario could carry that torch? Well, part of what made it possible was 3D platformer as a simple way to market a game. Now, just imagine that at scale for every weird little thing you like. Even that. Let me use God Hand as an example, released by Capcom in 2006. Generally, it'd be labeled as a beat-em-up, but so was this. And yeah, they're both beating 'em up, but with very different approaches. One focuses more on tight combos and precise movement, and the other has adventure and puzzle elements to it. Even worse, there's a separate category we refer to with games called hack and slash. But like, we're drawing a line between whether it's a sword or fists? You're pressing the same buttons. How are we supposed to get more in the style of God Hand? How would people even know where to look?
One of the only tools we have in the toolbox is defining games in relation to others that they play similarly to.
We're quick to describe a new game like Star Fox or like Dark Souls. But if people don't know what those games are, and more importantly, isn't it doing a disservice to those trying to advance an existing genre by forcing them under the shadow of a peer?
Now these games are trapped, either being dismissed as copycats or frustrating people for straying too far from expectations. Iterating shouldn't be punished, but we don't really know where to draw that line. Lastly, much of this ties back to preservation and how we're charting the history of our games. What was important at the time of release, and what influenced other titles later on? Answering these questions should allow us to appreciate more where we're at today, but the nature of games as a medium makes it very difficult for the average person to explore. Makes it very difficult for potential curators to sample the full breadth of the industry.
This takes us back to our reliance on the companies that make these games. When they have such complete control over decades of history, they choose what you do or don't experience.
Console from one of our biggest companies is less than 25 years old, and yet the only way to play some of its highest selling games is to search secondhand, not only for a copy of the game itself, but also for the hardware to play it on. And you're going to need a controller, of course, and you'll need a memory card, and you better hope that your TV even has the right ports in the first place. And this is all for a well-known and relatively recent console. What do you do with something like a TurboGrafx 16? Or an old PC game? Or where most of gaming's history lies, the arcade. Digital re-releases do happen with games too, though they're at the whim of who holds the publishing rights, and their desire or expertise to accurately port them to modern consoles. I alluded to curation before, and I think its importance goes without saying.
Even when games are re-released or given the attention they deserve, it's often devoid of context. While it's incredible how many arcade archives titles are available, or even those old Japanese PC games through the Egg console line, they can easily be dismissed for a bunch of slop. Meanwhile, I'm curious how many of you fell in love with something because of its inclusion in the Super Smash Bros. Series.
Carefully directed by someone who has certainly played more games than any human on the planet. While even that is still limited to the gargantuan task of negotiating rights, and while we can't change what companies make available, what we can do is expand that curation and elevate games lost to history, prioritizing those that need higher public access. So, 3 broken systems are preventing this industry's culture from maturing: evaluation, categorization, and preservation. You want a balanced, nutritious diet, but how do you do that when there's no nutrition label? I believe we can make a dent in all this by just changing 2 small things. First, we add a new dimension to the traditional review scale. By adding a second axis, it's possible to capture the nuance of what makes each game special in the context of today. Supplementing the familiar bad to good experience axis is a new influence axis, which tracks where a game sits in relation to its peers. We have a whole spectrum to think about every game. Is it influential but doesn't hold up? Is it weird, with a lot of potential for improvement? A game could fall anywhere on this chart, and that could even change with time. To get us started on this, I have some 2,500 games loaded into a spreadsheet that are slowly getting filled out. This data is the backbone of the project, and it's made more accessible through this chart that doubles as a searcher and a visualizer. If the new scale reveals how games advance and innovate, clear genres and subgenres take shape for the first time. Enough documentation allows us to study the genealogy of video games, just when they branched off, or where those lines in history can be drawn. Was there a fundamental shift in the purpose of the gameplay? Or is it just a different execution of that same purpose? Did it just pull some mechanics from a different genre? Or is it a complete fusion? I consider these stories to be the true priority, something that outlasts any one game and uplifts our collective understanding of the industry as a whole.
After all, shooting games show the rise and fall of the arcade. Adventure games were at the forefront of computers. Brawling games give us the transition to the big budget showstoppers of today. Refining these genres over time is what made video games. Not companies, not franchises. Those are just characters in the real chronicles of gaming's history. Mainstream modern games got more complex and stacked foundational genres on top of each other. Meanwhile, genres in their truest form don't always maintain their popularity, even if they still see that steady progression toward perfection behind our back. Not keeping an eye on those stories has scrambled our perceptions of what these genres really are. So, in order to disprove the wishy-washy definitions on Wikipedia, it's also time to get started on a reference guide, an intersectional one that explains the parameters of each subgenre in relation to one another.
I'll close by putting the academic aspect of all this behind and just sharing that this exploration has been the most fulfilling time of a hobby that is equal parts frustrating and fun. To me, understanding the story of games is just as interesting as playing them, but it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Where do you even start? I can only imagine how intimidating it must be for new players, right? Who jump into something with layers of controls and mechanics built on top of each other. I think that we might take for granted being part of the journey of a genre sometimes. Seeing all of those things built up over time, gradually, seeing what works, what doesn't work, where it all fits. And, I think if we're able to spell out that journey in a really easy way for newcomers, that's how we make our favorite genres sustainable. Ultimately, it's going to be pointless if it's not built with the people who are going to be using it. So, shmup community, I'm picking on you first. What games do you see that are missing, good or bad, that are important or unusual? Do you agree with the current categorization? Let me know in the comments below. And everyone else, what genres do you want to see next? If you're new here, thank you so much for watching that video. I'm really grateful you spent that time with me, but I want to give you a quick warning. This page actually covers 2 projects.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to today's pitch.
They're both in the same place because, to me, they don't always feel that different. In both, we're going to be looking at how we got to the place that we are, how broken systems affect the things you love, and what we can tangibly do as a community to make it better. If you see this purple sidebar in a thumbnail, it's a video related to evaluation, categorization, and preservation of video games, the Belmont Index. If you see this orange sidebar, it's a video about the ways we can stop the wealthy and powerful from rigging the government at our expense. Liberty over greed. So if you're watching for politics, I hope it gets you a little interested in video games. And if you're not interested in any of that government shit, well, let's just say there's probably some fun little nuggets sprinkled around those other videos. Do I leak the release date for Half-Life 3 in the Mega Corporations unboxing one? Oh, and if you're watching for neither of those and just want to watch me fail on this journey, good luck. Bring a snack and stay hydrated. If you want to join these projects, I hope you'd consider hitting subscribe. And if you know others who might be interested, feel free to share it with them as well. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.